So welcome to episode 2 of the Video Marketing Podcast by Falkon Digital. Today we're going to be talking about why every business needs to have a video podcast. I'm your host for today. My name is Luke Sharon, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sadie Sharon. So Sadie, quick question before we get started. Do you actually watch any video podcasts?
To be honest, I don't really watch video podcasts. I tend to put a podcast on and listen to it in the car when I'm doing school runs or long drives. You know, I think driving in the car is the perfect time to listen to a podcast. So I don't really watch them on YouTube. I know YouTube's a big platform for them, but I personally don't use YouTube for that purpose. But I do watch a lot of snippets of podcasts on things like TikTok and Instagram. You know, those algorithms are all very much geared up to showing me the content that I want to see.
Yeah.
And often that's how I find a new podcast. When I see an interesting guest, somebody I like, and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting snippet about their life or interesting business anecdote. And I see it on TikTok or Instagram, and I'm like, right, I'll make a note of that to go or I'll click through if they've got the option to click through and add it to my list of podcasts for driving in my car.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm much the same. I don't really watch video podcasts all the way through, but I will definitely watch maybe like a 10, 15-minute snippet that's been kind of curated for me. And shorts, of course, in particular, shorts on YouTube and TikTok. I always see snippets of podcasts there, which is super interesting. And it kind of leads on to my first point, really, because I think, generally speaking, when people think about podcasts, they think about iTunes, they think about Spotify.
Yeah.
And there's a big audience there for sure. But what's interesting is iTunes has 93 billion subscribers on a monthly basis, which is a huge number. But YouTube has just announced they actually have 1 billion active users every single month, which is
on podcasts alone.
On podcasts alone, yes, absolutely. Of course, the viewership for YouTube in total is obviously far bigger. And what's interesting as well is very recently, they talked about how YouTube has 400 million active users that watch YouTube from their TVs at home.
Yeah.
And video podcasts make up a very, very large percentage of this.
I don't watch podcasts on YouTube, but I know a lot of people who do sit and watch YouTube as their main streaming platform, and they seem to consume everything on there, whether it's TV, films, and podcasts included. And I do see sometimes people with their phones open and they're not looking at their phone, but they're listening to it. And I can see that they're actually on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I think although we're probably, we do have quite busy lives as business owners and parents. So I think we try and find the most efficient way to get that content. But that necessarily isn't what everybody else is like. And the data's there from YouTube that people are actively using it and watching the long form content on there.
Exactly. And we've spoken before. We spoke in the last episode about how our kids choose to watch YouTube over any other kind of streaming platform that we have. And I don't want to sound like a kind of creepy, nosy neighbor, but I do walk past one of our neighbors' houses because they always have their blinds open. And as I walk past, I always have a bit of a sneaky look through the window. And every time I look through, they have this big TV in their living room and they're always watching YouTube. I've never seen them watch normal TV.
No.
Anytime I've ever walked past.
They're going to close their blinds from now on.
They should. They really should, because there's some creepy guys around. And you're looking right at him, seemingly. So, and you kind of touched upon it already, but I think one of the reasons that podcasts are very popular on YouTube is because of YouTube's recommendation engine. YouTube is very good at understanding what audiences want based on their consumption patterns.
Yeah.
And so people find that actually they get way better recommendations on YouTube than they do on any other kind of podcasting platform.
Yeah. TikTok and Instagram have got very good recommendation engines as well, especially TikTok with your For You page. It shows you things you didn't even want to admit you like.
Yeah.
But Google has got just so much more data on you, so much more information, and the recommendation is just so slick.
Yeah.
In the way that, it doesn't miss the point very often. It is a really good recommendation engine. So when it starts suggesting podcasts to you, you're probably going to stay and watch them because it knows your viewer habits. It knows what side of the political spectrum you're on. It knows where you stand with all sorts of probably civil rights and things like that.
Sure.
Think of all the times that you sign in via Google
Yeah.
Having that information is all collaborating towards this image they have of you.
Yeah. And it is true because that recommendation is good. I often do find new podcasts, new creators through YouTube.
Mm.
And then because if I do listen to a podcast, I normally listen to it in my car if I'm going to
Yeah.
listen to the full episode. So I will then find those creators on Spotify to then listen to them later,
Yeah.
even though I've originally sourced them through YouTube.
I think from the sourcing point of view, it's usually the short form content that gets my attention.
Yeah.
Because when you start any podcast, you know you're in it for the long haul, aren't you? I
Yeah.
mean, even a short podcast episode is about 20 minutes. So there's always this sort of formula of, hello, welcome to our podcast. This is my guest for today. And when it comes to short form content, unless that guest is like, amazing, you're probably going to scroll past, and they show them straight away. You're probably going to scroll past pretty quickly. But on things like, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, TikTok. I always talk about Instagram and TikTok because they're sort of the main platforms that I work with. But you can get some really juicy bits of information that would probably be sort of 40 minutes, maybe an hour into the podcast.
Yeah.
But it's because it's that time when the guest has opened up and
Exactly.
they're really in the flow and the questions have gone back and forth. But there's that juicy information that really makes you think, oh, that's caught my attention, or it's a pain point that I can relate to. And I think that's a really powerful content that comes from video and your podcast.
Exactly.
I've seen it a few times, Diary of a CEO. You'll have some of these guests in, and the bit that I've seen is, maybe an actor that I know and love, and they're crying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what's happening? I need to know more. Give me the tea, tell me what's happened. And they'll give you such a short little bit of information. It's very cleverly edited.
Yeah.
Because it draws you in with that emotion. It gives you half of the story, and then you're like, I need to go and find this episode. Either find it on YouTube and skip to that bit, or find the actual podcast and listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree. I think as well, I think the reason that the viewership is getting so big on YouTube is because of the YouTube partnership program. The fact that creators can make money so easily through ad revenue without needing to get sponsorships or anything else. It's all based on their watch time and and everything else. That's a big draw for a lot of creators, I think. And I think that's why so many of them are heading there for their main platform.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons we've set up this podcast studio is because we were talking to podcasters and they weren't videoing their podcasts. And they were like, at some point, I'm really going to make a lot of money from my podcast. It's not about the money, but I'm going to make a lot of money from my podcast. And they had really active listeners, active followers. I was like, well, where's your YouTube channel? The amount of people listening to your podcasts, if that even translates to a percentage of YouTube, then you would get monetized very quickly.
Yep.
And if they're watching a full hour episode or 2 hour episode,
yeah,
the monetization on that could easily fund their YouTube channels.
Oh, yeah.
For this relatively small investment of just adding video.
Yeah.
Not to mention the extra potential for little snippets, promoting it to a wider audience.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I had this conversation yesterday with an established podcaster. He's nearly 100 episodes into his journey, which is incredible. And I said to him, I've seen you obviously on Spotify. I've listened to some of your podcasts. I've seen snippets of things on Instagram. Saw a few bits on TikTok. So I couldn't find your YouTube channel. And he was like, yeah, we haven't got one. I was like, oh, no, you're kidding. That's such a missed opportunity. Yeah. I was like, did you film any of your podcasts? He's like, yeah, I filmed every single one. I was like, what? I was like, so where are these videos? What have you done with them? He said, I've done nothing with them. They're just sat on a hard drive.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my, you are sat on like
a gold mine,
literally.
I know, 100 episodes, and they're good, those ones. I know who you're talking about, and he's very, very good, and he has some very good guests on as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I was just like, you need to do something with that.
Here's some free consultation. Get them on YouTube.
Yeah, that's my consultation to you. It's done. Just get them on YouTube.
Send you the bill. But it is a no-brainer, really, isn't it? Especially for somebody who's an established podcast and has already got that content lined up. I mean, one of the biggest problems businesses have is having the content to put up there.
Exactly. That's their biggest issue, is actually creating the content, which actually leads me back on to why businesses need to be creating video podcasts as well. I think one of the big missed opportunities that business kind of aren't aware of or don't really think about is how different people use different platforms.
Mhm.
So it's not just about creating a podcast that's going to go onto Spotify or iTunes or anywhere else. You can go cross-platform. Video really gives you that incredible opportunity to create tons and tons of content
Yeah.
from just one single episode.
Well, most businesses know that they should be doing video.
Mhm.
I think that message is kind of drilled
Yeah, they're
home.
sold on it. They've got it.
Yeah, and they know that they probably should invest in better video.
Sure.
But there are opportunities with good content to just do video very quickly and cheaply.
Yeah.
But video and podcasts, they seem to be a very different thing.
Mhm.
And whilst people are very much like, I need to do video, they're not necessarily thinking I need to do podcasts in the same way.
Yeah.
But podcasting can be a very easy way to get the content you need without having to spend hours and hours and hours doing scripted content and animations and all sorts of other stuff. You can get that content out there really quickly, and you have that added bonus of it's a podcast as well.
Exactly. I'm probably going to give you an example here of an interaction I had with a client. Now, this guy was the CEO of a massive, massive logistics company, and they knew they needed to create some video content. It was actually for investors because they wanted to completely revamp all of their ships, basically, to make them greener. There's certain green policies they had to adhere to. It was going to take a lot of money to do it, but they had a really, really good plan. So they needed to create this video content. And we spent a long time scripting these videos, putting everything together, making sure that we had the right messages in the right order and it was all going to be delivered correctly. Now, I had a couple of Zoom calls with him before our filming date. And just to give you some insights, he is probably like, I don't want to guess his age wrong, but somewhere, I'd guess probably in his mid-50s. Very, very clever guy. Knows his business inside out, knows the industry inside out. He also had this kind of very, very charming, old-fashioned British demeanor to him. And when you speak to him, again, he's very, very personable, very, very charming guy, lots and lots of personality. So when we're talking about the messaging and the content, he is fantastic. He's great, really, really good. When we arrived on the day to do the filming, same thing again. The initial interaction I had with him was great. Really, really charming, personable guy. Sat him down, put him in front of the camera. As soon as he looked at the camera lens, all that personality just disappeared. It was like he suddenly became super aware, super self-aware of every single movement that he was making. And the best way I can describe it is he kind of turned into a robot. He was delivering the messages, but even after a while, even the message he was trying to deliver, he started tripping over his own words. He was just kind of, without being disrespectful, he kind of fell to pieces.
It's a very hard skill to perform to camera.
It is. It's a learned skill.
It is. I mean, that's why actors get paid lots of money.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to do. It's not as simple as they make it look.
Yeah.
And not everyone can do it. I certainly can't do it. I just blather on.
I think you're not giving yourself enough credit there. But
no, I mean, I avoid the camera at all points because you're very good in the. I mean, it's a learned thing. It's something that you've worked very hard on with your own YouTube channel to make you better at presenting, and you're very good at writing and delivering a script. But that is something that you have worked quite hard on. Me, I'll say something different every single time, which means for continuity, nobody can put a decent edit together.
Yeah.
And I just sort of fall apart. I start off strong and then I tail off and then I'm like, oh, and I should have said this and I should have said that. And if you ask me to actually memorize a script, I'm the same. I deliver it like a robot. I can't deliver it with any passion or any enthusiasm. I'm just not that good of an actor. And it's not even that the passion isn't there. It's just once you start given a script, it then turns into a performance.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But I'm quite happy doing podcasts.
Well, this is the thing. So he was really struggling to deliver this clear, concise message to camera, but again, he could talk about it. No problem at all. Now, it took us about 2 hours to get this video done. We got it. We got there in the end and we got what we needed and it worked. It was fine. But if we'd spent half that time, an hour, in an environment like this, where we're having conversations and we were just talking about it, we would have got that video in about 10 minutes. And then in the remaining time, we probably could have got enough content for about another 5 or 6 videos. And it would have been so much better because he would have had all of his personality still. I think even though when you first walk into an environment like this, there's microphones, there's acoustic treatments everywhere, there's lights, there's cameras. But because
It's very bright.
it is, because I'm looking at you, to be honest, after about 5 or 10 minutes, I kind of forget that the cameras are there. I forget that the mics are there. But, as a result, I think that's why people relax in a podcast. And that's why, as you said earlier, they might take a snippet from about an hour in because they're fully relaxed for that point. They've got used to everything. They've got used to the environment.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to get the real gold out of conversation.
I mean, we did a shoot not that long ago with this absolutely gorgeous personality, the owner of the business. She was fantastic, beautiful woman. And she does a lot of lives. She's built up her own business by doing live Q&As. So she's quite comfortable in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But again, her personality wasn't coming through. And we didn't even do a script for that. It was asking questions and answers. She was delivering the lines. And I think she was very aware that there were certain words that she had to say. And I think she was kind of overthinking her answers a little bit. So I don't know if you remember, but we just were like, oh, let's give it a bit of a break. You just stay there. Let's get the makeup artist last looks, make sure everything's beautiful. You look gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I say, I think we need to rethink this script a little bit. And I just said, well, how does it actually work, this product? And she said, oh, it's really interesting because.
And she gave you all the science,
and then that was it.
Yeah.
She was amazing. We got so much content from her because she knows it inside out. And we just kept the cameras rolling.
Yeah.
And got it all. Yeah. And it was just taking her out of that pressure of everybody staring at her, watching her try and get the same answers.
Yeah.
She just talked to me directly and told me all about this project. I was like, I don't really know much about your project. I've only been brought in to help with the filming. So you tell me. And that was where we got all the gold.
It was. But if you think about it, if you said, tell me about yourself, just tell me 5 facts about yourself, you could do it, no problem. Whereas if I said, right, I've written 5 facts for you about yourself, now deliver them exactly as they are in this script, it'd be a way harder task to do. And again, that's why I like that kind of conversational element. And it takes the pressure off people who aren't trained or haven't had experience in front of a camera. It enables them to create.
I mean, even people who are experienced in front of the camera, a lot of podcasts, they have actors on.
Yeah.
And they're really interesting because the conversations go on for long enough.
Yeah.
And you start to see the insight of what that person's really like, because you can do a 30-second reel and you could be absolutely anybody if you're a good enough actor.
Yeah.
And, that includes business owners. You can put on that persona. And I think the world is kind of a bit sick of fake news and they're a bit sick of the fakeness and the filters and everyone's sort of craving that authenticity.
Yeah.
And a podcast gives you that because you can start it off being your very best version of yourself. And I'm very prim and proper.
You can't keep the facade up for that long.
No. Once you've really got into a rhythm of a conversation, it drops and you get to see people's true colours, for better or for worse. But generally it's for better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially from a business, when you really know your stuff, there's none of this snake oil salesman approach from a podcast or from the content you get from a podcast. It's very genuine. It's very true. You can see the passion, you can see the authenticity, and it builds trust much faster than any other way. And that's why podcasts have become so popular as well.
Yeah.
But if you can see the whites of their eyes while they're doing it in video.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing really is that for businesses, it gets rid of that camera anxiety. Because again, I've had so many conversations with businesses where we've touched upon it already. They're sold. They know that they need to make video. They understand the benefits. They can see.
We don't have to give them the stats anymore. No, they've seen it.
Exactly. But then the issue is, well, okay, you want to do it. Who's going to be on camera? And I've had situations where
they're drawing straws. Who gets a short straw?
Like the managing director of the business, who would be the perfect person to interview. They really, really don't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to convince me that actually the apprentice that they've got, who's 18 years old, who is familiar with cameras, they should be the spokesperson.
Who does loads of TikToks?
Yeah. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. They don't know your business. They don't know your business like you do. You're the ideal person. You just got to get over this camera anxiety.
Yeah.
And this is a good potential solution. The other thing for businesses is it's that reach. So the stuff that we talked about at the start, one podcast episode, it creates the audio file for iTunes and Spotify. It creates the long form content for YouTube. Remember, YouTube has those billion active podcast listeners every single month. You then, from that same episode, you might have 2 or 3, 5 or 10 minute snippets as individual videos that can go on your YouTube account. You then have the shorts. Shorts can go as YouTube shorts, as TikTok, as Instagram Reels, on LinkedIn, everywhere. So the amount of reach, the amount of touch points that you're creating from a single piece of content is just undeniable.
I think it's the wrong word there, reach.
You think?
ROI.
ROI, yeah, very good.
Because the investment for a couple of hours in a podcast studio like this, I mean, not to be too salesy, the amount of content you get from that, I don't know anywhere that gets you the same level of ROI on your content.
No, that's actually a really, really good point. I was just thinking of it purely from
reach.
You're
that's the difference between you and me, isn't it? Because you're very much focused on how can I get this to perform?
Yeah.
And I'm very focused on what do you get that. I mean, obviously the performance, getting millions of views for a creator is one thing, getting even thousands of views for a business, but that business translates into money.
Yeah.
I know that is something that you look at a lot, but I'm always looking at, well, if they're spending this much, what are they actually going to get for it? And if they're spending this much and they get all that content, then it's a no-brainer really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas so we do these content days, don't we?
Yeah.
And we try and get as much done and we plan it all in advance so we can get as much return on investment for that content day. But you can get almost as much in just a couple of hours in a podcast.
If you have the right planning, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's different needs for different stuff because obviously the content you come in a podcast, you get really good insights into the business, but then also the content days that we do, it might be we get models in who are showing off the stuff.
Exactly.
It's very different kind of approach to video.
Yeah.
But if you're just starting out in video as a business, it really does seem like a no-brainer to do some podcast episodes. And even if you don't go on and do a podcast for, once a month for the next forever of your business, that initial content could give you such a boost to your business and ROI that then you can start looking at doing something properly. Is the podcast working? Was it the video that was working? Should we do more video like this? Should we expand our video range? And it's just that nice little dipping your toe for a decent return on investment to be doing what everybody's telling you to do.
Well, I was actually explaining to one of our clients recently about our own video marketing because they said to me, in January, you said you were going to create loads more content for Falkon and you did it for like a week and then you kind of stopped. It's like, why?
Yeah, because it worked.
Well, exactly. That's what I said. He said, why did you stop? I was like, because we got busy. We created 5 pieces of content. For those 5 pieces of content, we distributed them everywhere. And what was interesting was I thought, one platform would be more successful than the other. But actually, it was really fascinating where all of our inquiries came from. We got one from LinkedIn. We got some from YouTube. We got some from TikTok.
TikTok does surprisingly well.
Bearing in mind, TikTok was our smallest platform. Yeah. It was a brand new account.
It was brand new. We didn't have any followers.
We had 0 followers, And we got an inquiry from TikTok, which I thought was crazy, really, given the size of everything else.
And we only had 5 videos on the TikTok account. So
it's
not like we
now,
built
I think there's
trust.
only 6 or 7, isn't there? So so
after watching this, there might be 8.
Exactly. So I just thought it was really fascinating where they were all coming from. But again, it just shows the power. What was 1 week? If we were actually consistent and actually even if we just made 1 video a week.
We're like the builder whose house is falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We just don't practice what we preach, but we do help businesses create that consistency. And we have been busy with other businesses creating that consistency and getting that success, especially at the moment where the economic climate is a little bit weak. So getting a return of investment from video, it really is the way that all businesses should be going.
Yeah.
So what businesses do you think are doing the podcast and video the best that you've seen?
Wow. So I've probably seen quite a few businesses that are doing this pretty well, some of which I used to work with. In fact, there was one, I was actually at an event for them back in March last year. And while I was there, I was using the opportunity to kind of speak to all of his customers and the attendees, just to kind of find out more about them. Because the more I could find out about them, the better I can do the marketing, really.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating to me was this company had dedicated marketing teams. They're spending a lot of money on ads and everything else. But one thing that they were doing really, really well is that they were creating regular podcast content
Mhm.
and they were creating tons of YouTube content, which is why I was
Yeah.
involved in the process anyway. Now, what was interesting was back then, I wasn't 100% sold on their podcast approach, their podcast strategy.
Yeah.
But every person I spoke to, I said, how did you find out about this? How did you find out about this event?
Mm.
And every single one said either the podcast or YouTube.
Yeah.
So despite all the paid marketing and everything else they were doing,
Yeah.
podcast,
LinkedIn marketing.
yeah,
Google.
podcast and YouTube was the main source,
Mm.
which I
And
found
they're obviously
fascinating.
conversions, aren't they? So it's
Exactly.
the converting traffic.
Exactly. Now I was working on their YouTube channel, and we had a lot of different tracking aspects in, and I could see the lead generation that was coming through from every video that they published, which was great. So I knew they were getting stuff from YouTube, but I didn't have access to the data for the podcast. But
Yeah.
seemingly it was doing something similar itself.
Yeah.
And what was happening was, it was a way for these customers to find out about the business.
Yeah.
But then they were watching all the content.
Yeah.
And they were listening to all the podcasts in their cars or when they were traveling. And so they were really, really bought into the ambassador of the business.
Yeah.
They really wanted to meet him. They wanted to work with him
Yeah.
because they'd heard so much from him personally in all the content he produced. And it's the same with, there was another, it wasn't really a client of ours, but we did some consultancy for him. He was like a mental health counselor, I guess, or probably the best way to describe it. And he had a fantastic podcast. And he, again, was very, very personable. And I think when you're dealing with things like mental health, to hear someone that you like the sounds of, you think, I like this person. I would trust this person with my secrets and the things that are, the mental health issues I have, to speak to them. I think that goes a really, really long way. And it's something that, how would you have done that in any other medium? Don't know how. It's been very difficult to do, I think, or to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that's the authenticity that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
What about you? Have you seen any businesses that are doing particularly well with podcasts or video podcasts?
I think the quality of guests really works very well. I was actually speaking to another mental health podcast just yesterday, actually. Obviously, mental health is something that I'm a huge advocate of. And I am a director of a nonprofit. So I do speak to quite a lot of people in the mental health industry. They said something that really hit home to me, which takes it on another level, really. So it's not really to do with business. It's very personal, but they got a message from somebody who said, I listened to your podcast. I listened to this particular story and it made me go and get help.
Wow.
And that was very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And that person was like, I don't think I saved his life, but if I help this person go, that makes it very powerful.
Sure.
So if you can change people's lives in a powerful way like that, I think that's why the mental health ones really do kind of hit home and they seem to have more impact. But we can all relate to the stories in lives. I mean, marketing is about storytelling, and podcasting is the modern way of sitting around a campfire, sharing your stories and giving it. But we do have the extra bonus so it can get all over the world and everyone can hear these stories. So I think you can easily translate that storytelling to a brand, and create content that won't save lives. But if your product is good enough and if your services is good enough, it can make a difference.
Sure. That was very deep for a Friday morning, but yeah, I agree with you completely. That sounds great. Yeah.
I think though with mental health, there's certain industries, mental health and happiness, basically.
Yeah.
That you just really, they're in their own box and those messages really need to be amplified as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Your new TV stand, yes, it will be very useful if it can get to the right audience. But health and happiness.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap everything up. But as a message to everyone that's listening or to everybody that's watching, if you do have a business and you know that you should be creating video content, but you haven't started yet or not quite sure how to approach it, a video podcast could be the best place to start. This has been episode 2 of the Video Marketing Podcast by Falkon Digital. I'm your host, Luke Sharon, and
I'm Sadie Sharon.
we'll see you in the next episode.